Alonso on the podium after all, which means Aston Martin is here to play. Are we too early to say that Aston Martin is the second best team on the grid thus far?
I think it depends on the situation, because in qualifying, the Ferrari was second fastest car on the grid. And I think we didn't really see the full potential of the Ferrari in the race, because Carlos Sainz really struggled, and Leclerc actually looked very good in that first stint. I remember he was on soft tyres, everyone else on mediums. He made them last longer than Carlos's one, so clearly he's got a better understanding of how to look after them. And he was pretty competitive. He was moving through the field ahead of Max Verstappen, and then it was only when Max caught up with him that he pitted and got out of the way. So I think the Ferrari, there's still the potential there, but I'm not going to try and defend Ferrari necessarily, because they've had such an awful start to the year with the combination of reliability issues and just minor setbacks here and there. I'm not going to hold the strategy against them this race, because the safety car timing was a bit unfortunate for them. But clearly there's still a bit of work to do there as well, and communication as well. We can get stuck into that between Leclerc and his engineer. So I think Aston have got an incredibly good, solid car that seems to work, has a very wide operating window, works in many different types of situations, which is very positive. That's exactly what you need in Formula One to mount any kind of challenge for a championship position. But I think we will see the Ferrari come back over time, and it's clear that the Mercedes and the Aston are very closely matched. So track to track, we might see things change a bit as well.
Lauren,
and obviously
it's reliable as a car. Sorry, Katie.
No, go.
Do you feel like the Aston looks like a very reliable car compared to maybe, I know the Red Bull had issues with reliability as well. They were saying that it wasn't front and center right now because the car was fast, but they were struggling with reliability issues. And obviously we've got Ferrari also struggling in that position.
Yeah, I mean, Stroll didn't finish in Saudi, so that's about as bad as it gets, right? It's one thing to have issues in qualifying, start further back, but the race is where you want to make sure that the car is bulletproof. But it's I think all these teams at this stage, especially when you're in as competitive a situation as Aston Martin are in with Ferrari and Mercedes, you've got to push the car to the limit. And, at this stage of the season, often you find where the weaknesses are as a result. But I wouldn't be overly worried about the Aston at this stage, because it does have the Mercedes engine, gearbox, rear suspension, all of which proved very reliable throughout last year. I've been reasonably reliable on the actual Mercedes as well this year. So I think over the course of the year, I mean, this is very much just basing it on a very small amount of data and trying to extrapolate. I would say that I'd probably have more faith in the Aston Martin holding together than the Ferrari. I don't know about you guys.
I have more faith in most cars doing something more better than the Ferrari, to be honest with you, at this stage. But I know what you mean. I think that reliability thing is interesting. I think it's maybe the one thing that gives a glimmer of hope in the season, is that you've got these two chasing teams in Aston and Mercedes that do seem a bit more reliable than certainly the Ferrari, like Lawrence said, but also, Red Bull. We saw, it sounded like for the last 15 laps. I mean, as terrifying as it was when they said we were managing the pace and they were still, driving fast enough to put in fastest laps, but they were worried about at least one of those cars not finishing. So, maybe that's just a one-off thing, but when you have that so early on, and it's fascinating, isn't it, that reliability has been a really big thing this year across the grid, which we didn't. I mean, it was for some teams last year, but it seems to have really stepped up a bit this season. So I'm kind of clinging on to hope there. That I think Lawrence said it perfectly after the Bahrain show, or before the first race. He said the ideal situation is you have the fastest car is the least reliable in a season, and the chasing cars maybe aren't as quick, but are the more reliable, and then you have that great mix for the season. Not saying the Red Bull is super unreliable, but if that is a weakness of it, it opens up the door to certainly Aston and Mercedes to pick things up. So fingers crossed we see a bit more of that, because I mean, otherwise I don't know what's going to stop the Red Bull from just running away with 1-2s all year.
We'll have two races. We'll be able to watch Checo and Max, and then the rest of the grid.
Yeah, the race for third suddenly becomes
exactly.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.